Hi, I'm Larry Castle here with Ken Brown for episode 81 of That's a Good Question. What has Durham found? Welcome to this episode. Today is a periodic look at what's in the headlines. From time to time, we devote an episode or two to what's going on in the political and cultural world around us. And most of the time, we devote our podcast to matters that are directly affecting our beliefs and our practices as Christians. For instance, we spent the last two episodes talking about our identity as evangelicals. And I say some things affect Christians directly because really all things affect us at least indirectly.
Right.
And we're Christians first, but we're also citizens too. So our families and our relatives, our church family, this is our primary concern. But we're also members of society, and we're in relationship to the culture around us. And we need to be aware of what's going on around us. So the topic today then, and perhaps even next week if it spills over, have to do with what's happening around us. We talk about these things so that we can bring biblical principles to bear on issues that otherwise could consume a lot of our time and our energy as Christians. Too often considering how we should look at these matters from a biblical perspective. So here we are, two pastors. We happen to think a lot about what the Bible says and try to teach it to people so we can help put this into practice. So today we're going to talk about something that's been in the news the last few days, and that is about a filing that John Durham made in court related to his investigation of whether President Trump was spied on by the Obama administration and the Clinton campaign.
Right.
And so we're going to consider what has Durham found. That's our question for today. And it's been all over the media, especially the right-wing media this week, right?
Yeah, it has. It has. But before we get into that, I want to say that as pastors, we do care about whatever affects the people it is to whom we minister, as what affects them also affects their and our ability to carry out our mission. And so I want to make sure we understand that's why we get into this stuff at all. As an example, if we're led astray by the news sources to which we've chosen to give our eyes and our ears, and those sources deliberately seek to instill fear in us to keep us tuning in because only they can tell us the truth, then we're going to have people doing the very thing God commands against. Actually commands against more often than any other thing. That is against being fearful, against being afraid. In fact, just yesterday, I was in my car. It was around noon, and I turned on AM radio. That's something I hadn't done in a very, very long time. So long, in fact, that I did not know who had taken Rush Limbaugh's spot in his decades-long noon to 3 o'clock time slot. We're in the Eastern time zone. It was about 12:10, so just after noon. And so I hear this guy talking, and as he's talking, his tone and his substance are scary. He's implying sinister things that are happening on the part of the liberals and the left, that Biden and the Democrats, for example, are deliberately producing inflation to make it harder for the little guy to get by.
And for them to get reelected.
Well, yeah, that's going to be tough, isn't it? It's going to be tough. But, they want this, making it, they don't care about the little guy, harder for the little guy to get by. And that's why he says, I have parallel economy. I'm going, parallel economy? I mean, that sounds to me almost survivalist, like, you got to have your own stash of stuff. I just didn't know what that meant. Well, it turns out it's a payment system, like a Cash App or a Squarespace or something.
Cash App just uses regular money, though.
Well, I said Cash App. Now that's me saying Cash App.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. I don't know what this thing does, but it's supposedly whatever it does, it makes it more safe than other systems.
Are they an advertiser on that show?
Well, an advertiser. Stay with me, okay? Right. Yeah, I wanted to learn who was talking, and it turned out to be Dan Bongino. Now, does he have the old Rush slot? I don't know.
I don't think so. I heard somebody, I don't know who the guy is, but I heard somebody on there recently. I think that might be the new
Okay.
person.
Well, he said during this, though, that he gets people writing into him and saying, hey, you're no Rush, and all of that. So I wondered, and
Oh,
he
I
was,
could be wrong.
And he was paying homage to Rush because it was the 1-year anniversary of his passing, I think.
Okay.
But it may have just been he was sitting in, because I
Gotcha.
know he has his own thing, Bongino does, for sure. But I've rarely, I know his name, but that's about it. But I later looked up Bongino and I looked up parallel economy, and it's something he's invested in. And he's driving his listeners to use. In other words, he profits from it.
I'm shocked.
Yeah.
I am shocked.
I did, So I did a little more on Bongino, whose name I'd heard, as I say, but I obviously don't follow. And it turns out he has many business enterprises, and according to one article, he's profited more from the Trump years than anyone else in media. He's been able to parlay some of these things into business ventures. Now, nothing illegal or anything about that, but nevertheless, just bear that in mind, friends, that there's always an agenda, okay? And that's true of left and that's true of right, and just let's not be naive. I think the only time prior to this that I had heard him speak was a short clip I saw from a Fox News program a couple months ago, and Geraldo Rivera was on Hannity, and Geraldo said the January 6th riot was a riot that was, he said in his words, unleashed, incited, and inspired by the President of the United States, which targeted American democracy. And after Hannity objected, Geraldo reminded him of his own text, that is Hannity's own text, that had been published that very week. Where while the riot's going on, Hannity is begging the president to intervene and stop the riot, as did Laura Ingraham, as did Brian Kilmeade.
Yeah. So we talked about this. They knew who had the ear of the rioters. They knew if we're going to have somebody direct this, change this, it wasn't going to be Black Lives Matter. It wasn't going to be Antifa or undercover FBI operation.
Right.
All of which are things that then they proceeded to claim might be behind this on Fox News.
Right.
But it was the president himself.
Exactly. And they knew that the whole time. So, and as we've said about that since it happened, if it was one of these other groups, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, if it was some FBI thing, well, as right-wing folks have claimed, Trump didn't get that memo because when he finally was persuaded to call off the rioters hours after the riot began, he said, we love you, and never forget this day. All right, so back to Geraldo. When he said that on Hannity, Bongino was on as well. And so they had all three of them. It's Hannity's show. He's got Geraldo on, he's got Bongino. And Bongino immediately jumps in to defend Trump, and he accused Geraldo of backstabbing the former president. So here's a guy like Bongino who's all in for Trump, clearly. And more important, he's all in for Trump's MAGA followers, and they listen and then purchase. And he's on the radio this week, and as I hear him, for a short period of time, it's frankly frightening. And I didn't know who it was at first. I listened long enough to hear his name mentioned, and to know who it was. Now, if you listen to that for a few hours, and especially if you do that uncritically, you cannot help but be afraid. You'll be very afraid. I went to my meeting, and when I came out, it was before 3. And so I was curious, does this go on the whole 3 hours? Did I just catch him at a particularly shrill time? So I turned it back on. Same thing. Fear. Fear of the left, fear of liberals, and the coming destruction of the country. So one of the things about which I am concerned, as a pastor, we're concerned about, is the well-being of Christian people as they take in media. The media that we choose to take in and we give our minds to. And this Durham matter is yet another example of how agenda-driven media can get matters woefully wrong, work people up into a lather over so-called facts that turn out not to be factual at all.
Yeah. So then let's talk about who is Durham and what news did he make this week?
So he is what's called a special counsel. He was appointed nearly 3 years ago now by Trump's then Attorney General, because 3 years ago it was the Trump administration, and Trump's Attorney General Bill Barr appointed John Durham as a special counsel to look into whether the Obama administration or the Clinton campaign spied on Trump and or his people before and after he was in the White House. Now, Trump infamously made a claim just as he was entering office after the 2016 election that Obama, this is a quote, had tapped his wires. And now he had no facts to support it, but it's been a rumor for 6 years. And Trump's attorney general gave it real life later. Bill Barr did a few years later when he told Congress he thought there was indeed spying. And in fact, I can still remember Bill Barr testifying before Congress and mentioned the word spying, and one of the congressmen came back to him later and said, "Hey, you said spying. We just want to make sure people don't think you think people were really spying on the president." He goes, No, I think there was spying. Yeah. So he clarified that he thinks they're spying, and he therefore appointed Durham to be a special counsel to look into it.
Okay, so if Durham's a special counsel appointed by Trump's attorney, Attorney General Bill Barr, right?
Right.
Neither Trump nor Barr are still in office now, then
Right.
why doesn't Biden's attorney general just fire him? You know, could he do that?
It's a great question. And yes, Biden's attorney general is a guy named Merrick Garland. He could indeed do that because a special counsel is actually an employee of the Justice Department, which the attorney general leads that whole department. He does not fire him. He has not fired him. And I think unless Durham does something egregious or just continues to go on, it's already been 3 years. And as we'll see, there hasn't been much that's come of it. And so unless he just thinks it's going on interminably and it's going nowhere, but he hasn't fired him, and in all likelihood will not, because contrary to what Trump has said and has led many to believe, the Justice Department and justice itself are not partisan. You know, Trump said a few years ago that you got Obama judges and you got Trump judges. And, you know, we really need to get out of thinking that way. Yes, there are conservative judges and liberal judges who look at the Constitution and statutes from a liberal perspective and a conservative perspective. But if you ever have anyone and you ever have any proof of that, and, you know, you got hundreds of judges on the federal bench and including the Supreme Court, but you know, if there are such, it's very few
You're
that engage
talking
in
more
partisan politics.
partisanship,
Exactly.
right? Yeah, you're talking about they have a particular judicial philosophy, and so they would be more likely to align with one or the other. But that's entirely different than being in that guy's pocket.
Exactly.
So to
I'm going
speak.
to do this because it helps my guy.
And that's what's implied
That's
when
right.
we
That's
talk
right.
about that.
That's
yeah.
right. Justice is supposed to be blind, and politics really should play no role in its administration. And Merrick Garland believes that. So he's allowing Durham to continue, even though he was appointed under another administration. He might, as I said, have to end the probe at some point if it continues to come up with nothing or next to nothing. But he's allowed it to continue, and I think that's the right thing to do. Now, if the roles were reversed, and it was Trump in office, and he had a holdover special counsel looking into allegations, alleged misdeeds by Republicans, I have no doubt that he would have instructed his attorney general to fire the special counsel. And if the attorney general refused, he'd fire him himself and get a new one. Now, how do I know that? Well, because when he was in office, he fired the FBI director who was looking into his dealings with Russia. And he fired his attorney general, his original attorney general. Bill Barr wasn't the original one. It was Jeff Sessions. It was his first attorney general, and he fired him because Sessions had appointed a special counsel to look into those dealings with Russia, and then had recused himself, did Sessions, from the investigation, gave it to the special counsel. So Durham has been investigating this alleged spying for 3 years, and so far he's come up with a couple of indictments of low-level people, as opposed to what the right-wing media has promised for these years. Hillary Clinton's going to jail. Obama might go to jail as well. Now, you contrast these 3 years to the less than 2 years of investigation that the special counsel Trump wanted fired, Robert Mueller, and whose investigation he called a witch hunt. We detailed all of this on That's a Good Question back on September the 18th of last year, and also on November 16th. September 18, November 16th.
I'll link to, like we've done in the past, I'll link to these in this episode.
Yeah. And And though we detailed on those episodes what Mueller found, so I encourage you to listen to those. But a summary is this: he indicted, convicted, or received guilty pleas from 34 people and 3 companies, including top advisors to President Trump, Russian spies, and hackers with ties to the Kremlin. The charges range from interfering with the 2016 election, hacking emails, lying to investigators, tampering with witnesses. Trump himself could not be charged while he was in office, and it's highly unusual for a former president to be charged after he's out of office. But Mueller detailed 10 instances of Trump obstructing justice in his report. But Durham's probe continues for nearly 3 years. Now, 22 months is how long Mueller went, 22 months. And I'm telling you, on Fox News, right-wing media, it was, this thing is going on forever. It's costing millions of dollars. It's a witch hunt. Okay, this is going on for 3 years. So far, as we'll see, has produced meager results. Maybe it'll produce something big in the future, but 3 years. He's indicted 2 low-level players for lying, and no one so far for spying.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I think about when all of that was going on with Hillary Clinton. I was very suspicious, very much impacted by what I observed her husband being capable of when he was in office. So I was very skeptical, and I followed a lot of that, thinking, not being doubtful at all that something's going to turn up.
Yeah.
So if I can do that, and then you have something like this, it just really, I'm really not being fair-minded if I don't see there's something to this with all that's turned up already. Yeah. So back to what we're talking about. The former president put out a memo this week saying that what Durham has uncovered is far worse than Watergate.
That's what he called it.
He called it.
Yeah.
And he said that in the past, those who engage in this kind of behavior would and should be put to death.
Wow.
What is he talking about?
He said both of those. Worse than Watergate, should be put to death.
Yeah.
Well, if you listen to Fox News, it is an enormous deal. Here is some of what they said this week. Their online headline to this story said, quote, Clinton campaign paid to infiltrate Trump Tower White House servers to link Trump to Russia, Durham finds. Now, they have the word infiltrate in quotes in this headline. But in reality, the word infiltrate appears nowhere in this filing that Durham submitted to the court this week. So characterizing it as a finding that he found this is misleading, to put it charitably. Over a 24-hour period, beginning Monday morning, this past Monday morning, infiltrate was mentioned at least 47 times on Fox News and Fox Business programming. That word is a quote. It is indeed a quote, but it's not a quote from Durham. It's a quote from a former Trump administration employee who has been pushing this whole Durham thing, this whole idea. A guy named Kash Patel, Kash with a K. You can look him up if you want. Hannity described the Durham revelation as, quote, the biggest election and presidential spying scandal in the history of this country.
Wow.
Jesse Waters' Fox program, he's talking to a Republican senator about it. And the Chiron, is it Chiron or Cryon? Cryon, is it?
I
Okay.
think, yeah.
Below says this. It says Durham, Clinton framed Trump.
So Durham says that.
This is what Durham found, that Clinton framed Trump.
Well, you have to relieve the suspense and tell us what happened then. What did Durham do this week? Who did he indict? Who did he convict? Who did he send to jail?
Well, here's the sad part. For all of those histrionics about it this week, Durham did none of those things. He indicted no one. He convicted no one. No one went to jail.
In spite of the fact that, according to the headline, he concluded Clinton framed Trump.
Yeah, and it's the worst thing since Watergate, and people should be killed, executed, and all of that. What he did do is issue a filing, and then this is the other thing. We keep using that word, a filing. It's a submission to the court. It's submitting a memo to the court, a document to the court, a filing. He filed this, and this information. So it wasn't an indictment. So that was the other thing. Sometimes people were using indictment. He issues a filing with the court, where he's in this court. Durham is trying a lawyer for the Clinton campaign for lying. He did indict that guy last September, and we talked about it.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah. That guy was indicted back in September. We talked about it on our podcast again on September 18th, so I won't repeat it here. But that has not yet gone to trial. Meanwhile, Durham gave a document to the judge this week that said someone involved in the case has a conflict of interest. It's a fairly routine matter. But he went beyond that in this filing to talk about his theory of the case so far. So it now gave some fodder to say, oh, okay, we see where he's going here. We see what's happening here. That was the idea. It's not an indictment, a conviction, or any of that. He said in this informational document to the judge, so follow, that the Clinton campaign lawyer who Durham indicted last year, he's a guy named Michael Sussman. That guy got information from another guy. I'll throw the names out there, but the second guy is a guy named Rodney Joffe. And that guy, Joffe, is also at least sympathetic with the Clinton team. And this would have been during the campaign in 2016. And so Sussman gets this information from Joffe. The information that he got showed weird communications from Russian-made phones to a server at Trump Tower, but also near the White House. Those servers kept pinging IP addresses. Now, you know what an IP address is, but it appears that a lot of the commentators on Fox News and all of that, they don't know what like a DNS lookup is, a domain name.
Domain name server?
Domain name server. You're looking up, and what that does, correct me if I'm wrong, you're a pastor geek, but we have our domain
Networking
name.
is not my thing. Yeah.
But cbctrenton.com.
Yeah.
We have a name, www.cb, but when somebody puts that into their browser and they want to go to our site, what the internet does is it has to do a lookup to say, where is that name, what's that associated with, in cyberspace. They have to go look up, and it's a series of numbers, IP address, right? And so our the computer you're on has an IP address. What you're trying to connect to has an IP address. That's the way it works, but nobody wants to be typing in those numbers all the time. And so we have names that are easy to remember, cbctrenton.com. But they're all in like a phone directory. That name's associated with a phone number. It's associated with an IP address. So that's the idea. And these IP addresses then, these numbers, sets of numbers, from these Russian-made phones that are not sold in the United States, by the way, are showing up. So it was weird. And it may have indicated something nefarious about the connections between Russia and Trump's people.
Yeah. So where did and how did, is it Joffe,
Joffe,
you said?
yeah.
How did he get this information that he passed on to Sussman?
Sussman, right.
And did he wiretap illegally? Did he, as the word was used, infiltrate servers at Trump Tower? Did he hack into Trump's computers?
So here's the thing. This guy, Rodney Joffe, is an executive with a cybersecurity company hired by the government to protect its systems. And his people saw this weird stuff I'm talking about. And they report it to him because it looked like Russian communication with Trump's organization. And now he took it to a guy he knew, a Clinton campaign lawyer.
Okay.
Sussman.
Okay.
And Sussman took it to the FBI.
So why didn't the first guy, Joffe, take it to the FBI himself?
You can't. If you're a contractor with the government, you have to be very careful about what you do with the information you receive. So for some reason, legally, as a government contractor, he's not allowed to do anything with the data except report to his superiors.
Okay.
But he can give it to someone else who can give it to the FBI. And
see.
so he gave it to this Clinton lawyer.
So they came by the data honestly, as far as everyone knows,
Right.
but they may have also honestly hoped that it would harm the Trump
Indeed.
campaign
Absolutely.
in some way.
Absolutely.
Since at least one of the two had previously worked for the
Exactly
Clinton
right.
campaign,
That's
right?
right.
So-
I have no doubt that Sussman, who again was indicted for lying last September, I have no doubt he loved the fact that he had this information and he hoped it would be used against Trump. But that's not illegal, it's political. And it says nothing about stealing the information. The information was actually obtained legally and used politically.
Yeah,
What
but
appears to happen.
and so, like you're saying, none of that's illegal. So how has Sussman been indicted?
So Durham claims that Sussman lied when asked whether, when he turned that information over, was he working for anyone, especially the Clinton campaign. He said, no, I was not working for him. Now, I keep referring to him as a Clinton campaign lawyer. I'm referring to him that way because in his past he has been that. So I want to make clear that I'm not trying to, I have no dog in this fight to cover anything up, certainly on behalf of Hillary Clinton, my goodness. But so this is a guy who not only is sympathetic to Hillary Clinton, he had in the past worked for Hillary Clinton. Whether he was working for her at the time he got this, that I don't know.
Gotcha.
But he said no. And Durham thinks he was. So he believes he was acting as part of the campaign, and that's going to have to be hashed out in court. Now, if that's the case, if this guy lied, and it's proven in court that he lied, it's not even still clear whether or not he'll be convicted, and here's why. In order to be convicted of making a false statement, the false statement actually has to be material. Okay, and if the issue is how did you get this stuff, and you got this stuff legally, then the fact of who you were working for, any of that isn't an issue, or at least that's what his lawyers are arguing.
Right.
Materiality.
That's
okay?
what they'll debate. Yeah.
That's what they'll debate. But
Is this material or not?
Is it material or not? And if it is material, and he did in fact lie, then I hope he's prosecuted and punished. So you got a couple of people who came across information legally, who probably thought it would hurt Trump, and were probably hoping it would, and he turned it over to the FBI. And Sussman later was interviewed by the CIA about what he had done as well. Now, it's not clear if he was working for Clinton folks at the time, so not clear whether he lied when he said he wasn't. If he was and he lied, as I said, he should be prosecuted. But using what you think is dirt against your political opponents is not illegal. And here's the thing, friends, it's not bigger than Watergate. And it's not worthy of being executed.
Yeah. So if that's all it is, how could even, how could the Fox News groups, the different hosts, the shows, what are they doing concocting such a tale about what Durham reported this week?
It's partly because if you read, which I did, this filing that Durham submitted, he makes it sound, Durham does, like the internet information is more than it was.
Which is easy to do because nobody really understands what that stuff means anyways.
DNS servers,
The name
IP
servers,
addresses,
the IP address,
all of that, exactly right. So people who read it.
You know me, we refer to me as Pastor Geek because I do so much with technology around here. I was swimming a little bit as you were naming those terms. I know what they are just enough to get confused in the mix,
Yeah. And what I said about it, as far as I know, is all I know about it too.
Yeah.
So people who read it took it to be more than it was. And Durham thinks that those who obtained it were anti-Trump. He's probably right about that.
Yeah.
And so you put the two together and it's like, oh, wow, holy cow, you got these anti-Trump people who come across this stuff and they're hacking. So now it becomes not, DNS lookups, it becomes hacking.
Yeah.
And people start using those kind of terms. So Durham says this in his filing this week, that Rodney Jaffe, the guy whose company legally came by this stuff, that he, quote, exploited his access to non-public and or proprietary internet data. Okay, you read that, you're a layman, and you go, okay, that sounds really bad. To obtain large amounts of raw internet data touching Team Trump. And he put his associates to work analyzing it, quote, for the purpose of gathering derogatory information about Donald Trump in order to please, quote, certain VIPs, end quote, at the Clinton campaign and its law firm, a firm called Perkins Coie. So you can see, he words it that way. You've got this internet stuff and you've got him exploiting his access to it, and he's doing it for the Clintons. Durham's most explosive assertion in that filing was detailing that internet data, which Sussman had taken to the government, this domain name system, and that was connected with other entities like Trump Tower, Donald Trump's Central Park West apartment building, and the executive office of the President of the United States. So he puts all of that in there. And again, I understand. To many people who read non-public or proprietary internet data being accessed that involve Trump Tower, Trump's apartment, the White House, you can be forgiven if you think someone hacked Trump's computers while he was president. But DNS data is not actually, you're not reading anybody's emails. You're not getting, It is sometimes what's called metadata. It's just, it's just pointers to actual stuff. So none of what they had was anything that the president said, anything that any of the people involved in this.
Yeah, when I think of like name servers and stuff, that's the details you'd need if you then wanted to hack.
Now I got to
But-
use that to get into.
Right. That's where the attack takes place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this data was metadata. It's no content. It's just traffic. It's just showing what's going on, which computer is going to which computer. And it was not hacked or stolen. And now get this. When it says the executive offices of the President of the United States, Trump wasn't president yet. This was actually Obama's.
I didn't even think about that as you were saying that.
Yes, the 2016. This is pinging near the White House while Obama is president.
Yeah, didn't even think about that while you were saying that. Wow. So whatever become of all that? Did the FBI do anything with it? Did they ever find out why the Russian phones were being used? Were they sending something to servers associated with Trump, but also to Obama? How would that work? Yeah.
So the FBI, looks into it, and actually Robert Mueller's people looked into it later. Nobody could determine what was going on there. It's a mystery. This company that had a contract with the government that this Rodney Jaffe is an executive for, he gave it to his people, and they use researchers at Georgia Tech University. And these researchers, again, if you're really interested in this, look up Georgia Tech researchers and Durham and metadata, and you'll find this. To this day, they are very suspicious of all of this, of what Russia was doing. Why do we have these Russian phones that aren't even sold in the United States doing that? To this very day, they say that stuff was so weird, but to answer your question, no, they couldn't get to the bottom of it. It was so weird that it was pinging at Trump's organization, Trump Tower, Trump's apartment, but also near the White House while Obama was in. And get this, Spectrum Health System in Michigan. We're located in Michigan for all of our and how do you put that together? I have no earthly idea.
Yeah, that's super odd. So there's not the claim that Trump was hacked then in reality.
Yeah.
And certainly not while he was in the White
Right,
House.
exactly.
Okay. So all of the hysteria then this past few days on the right wing is overblown, you're saying? Is that the conclusion
that's what
here?
we're saying.
That'd be so weird if that was what's going on.
And that's why we bring it up, to discourage our listeners from continually being led astray by people who apparently take little care to actually read the documents about which they're reporting, who latch on to anything that even tangentially seems to fit.
or due to find the right angle to exploit.
Yeah. So this fits, let's go with it, okay? It's my preferred narrative, and the preferred narrative is Donald Trump is a victim of a large plot to get him. This has been going on for 5 years. Hillary Clinton and Obama and other deep staters are behind it. Now, they played that card with great success politically and financially, I might add, for years now, but it's just not the case. Here's my advice. Let the justice process play itself out. Hopefully Durham will fish or cut bait soon. Either do something or say, I don't have anything, okay, of real substance, after 3 years now of nothing much. Now, perhaps he does have evidence that he's not yet shown anyone, and he has evidence of a grand conspiracy, and that those hoping to be proven right will be, but we'll see. But that doesn't mean that we should latch on to whatever's reported and buy into the exaggeration that fits Fox's or Newsmax's or whoever's agenda. Now, speaking of this week, after Durham made his filing with the court, Sussman's lawyers responded to the court. So this is all taking place just in the last few days. They responded to the court saying, in effect, this is overblown nonsense. And they say it's proven by how it's been misconstrued by right-wing media. And so Durham responds to that. So here you've got 3 then communications to the court. The original one from Durham, then Sussman's lawyers responding, and then Durham, late on Thursday of this past week, he responds to that about his claims being used as they are. And his report says this. It cites, citing a barrage of false reports on Fox News and elsewhere, based on Durham's February 11th filing. The defense lawyers for Sussman, first of all, have accused the special counsel of including unnecessary and misleading information that are, and this is what they said, those were plainly intended to politicize this case, inflame media coverage, and taint the jury pool. Well, then Durham responds on Thursday, and he defends himself, saying those accusations about his intentions were, quote, simply not true. He said he had, quote, valid and straightforward reasons, unquote, for including the information in what he had filed previously. And that all set off a firestorm. But he disavows any responsibility for how certain news outlets interpreted and portrayed it. Here's what he says. If third parties are, this is what he said just a couple days ago. If third parties or members of the media have overstated, understated, or otherwise misinterpreted facts contained in the government's motion, that does not in any way undermine the valid reasons for the government's inclusion of this information. So he says, okay, I understand that they're all going crazy with it, but that's not my fault. And then finally he adds this. But even as he didn't acknowledge any problem with how he couched that filing, he said he will make future filings under seal. Like not stick them out there in the public so that the media can go crazy with them.
Yeah.
If they contain, quote, information that legitimately gives rise to privacy issues or other concerns that might overcome the presumption of public access to judicial documents. In other words, if there's good reason to keep it private so that it doesn't take off like this one has. So in effect, he's saying this, all right, I'll be more careful in the future.
Yeah, so he's kind of acknowledging there, this isn't as big of a deal as they're making it. And if we have a hunch that this thing could be lit and, run with as a fireball.
Then I'm not going to stick it out there next time.
Interesting.
That would be very, very good. And we should all be much more careful with what we give our minds to. And we should filter those media outlets that consistently, friends, mislead. I keep coming back to this. I cannot recommend that strongly enough.
Yeah. Great advice. And, you see that pattern.
Yeah.
And then, there's lots of reliable sources, and nobody's right all the time. Of
course.
But people, especially people who acknowledge when they're not right.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we hope this has been helpful to you. Some of these issues like this, most of us do not have time to read all the detail and keep up. So appreciate the insight and detail from you on this. And we try to publish these episodes every week on Saturdays at 2 p.m. And if you're not already, if you subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification bell, you'll get a notification when they come out. And so I'd like to encourage you, if this is helpful to you, if you enjoy our podcast, share an episode with a friend, hit the like button on this. That'll help more people find it. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. If you have a question you'd like us to consider, you can send that in to our email address, info@cbctrenton.com, or text it to us at 97000.